Wanna talk? So let's talk. Here. Talk. You wanna talk? You gotta talk, you need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk, you wanna talk.
Welcome back to Talk to Solomon. Jessica Bradshaw is co-hosting. Chief Steve is co-hosting. Dr. Alan Keyes is our guest. We are talking about what's happening with the IRS among many other groups, because I think that the abuse the IRS is doing is not atypical, but is rather typical of every part of government. Whether it's OSHA, whether it's EPA, we have a government that is now working in America like government works in Chicago, where if you cross the bosses, they sick 'em on you, and since their jobs are at stake, they will do whatever needs to be done. Now, is that picture off, Alan, or is that close?
Well, no, Stan, I don't think the picture is off, but I think we need to realize, though, that this is the, how can I put it, the climax, as it were, of an assault that has been gradually building for the last several years. And that I would argue has been gradually building in one form or another, really since we were attacked on September 11th, 2001. And it is coming to a head now. And we're seeing a general offensive that's being revealed at the behest, by the way, of the people who are doing it. I think that's one thing to keep in mind here. Why do we know about these IRS problems? Because they planted a question that led to the revelations that we're now discussing. Isn't that special? I think we need to ask, what is it that they're up to that they would want us to know what is happening, and therefore rigged it to happen? We're looking at the revelations with the NSA. And I was more prone to think, oh gosh, somebody who saw these abuses and wants to help save the country. But if you want to save a free country, I don't know why you would flee to Hong Kong, do you? Since last time I looked, Communist Chinese are not big proponents of liberty. And so the fact that this whistleblower ends up going into and under the jurisdiction of the Communist Chinese has me scratching my head and thinking, well, what if, just as they wanted us to be seeing and talking about the IRS abuses, they want us now to be put in the picture with respect to this ability they have to know what's going on in all the communications we have, and the internet and the email and so forth and so on, which is quietly another little terror threat. Every time I have written about this phenomenon, by the way, I've tried to get people to understand that it's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, there are things we're getting all angry and outraged about in terms of these abuses that are occurring. But on the other hand, Stan, these abuses are also, I would think, having a chilling effect on a lot of people as they wake up to what some of us have tried to get them to see coming down the pike for years. But no, people who have been living with their heads buried in the sand, trying to pretend that everything's okay, even voting this guy into office, they're now waking up, and their reaction is the usual reaction of a deer in the headlights. They're paralyzed. They're scared. And I think that's part of what these people intend. Because I think the principle of tyranny, though a lot of people now don't read the books that tell you so, the principle, the motive, operating principle of tyranny is fear. Terrorism is not just an action or even a strategy. Terrorism is the principle of a form of government. And our founders understood this and explicitly said that they were founding a regime based on an understanding that would banish that principle as the organizing principle for our way of life. Instead, these folks are increasingly making it clear, no, be afraid. Be very afraid. We can listen to you. We're watching you. We'll come for you. And that's, of course, the implication of the IRS. Add one more item, Dan. Obamacare. The most important and decisive thing that has happened, and I said this to people all along, Obamacare is obviously not about health care, because you don't take a system that's functioning really well for 90% of your people and destroy it the way they have done in order to get 10% into the system. That's what the nonsense was that was going on. Why would you do something that stupid, Stan? It's taking something that works for 90% of the people and destroying it so that you claim you're going to make life better for 10%. No, you're going to give everybody a chance to have access to a broken system. That makes a lot of sense. No, it doesn't. That's not logical. If it's not logical, that's not their objective. That's what I would say. Because these aren't stupid people. Their objective is control. Their objective is to become the gatekeeper of life and death. So that just as they're saying, if you don't do what we tell you, we're coming for you using the IRS, it's going to be, if you don't do what we tell you, no operation. If you don't do what we tell you, no medicine. If we don't do what you tell you, no health care. That's not news, Stan. That's not something Alan thought up and is looking at and speculating about. That's how communist regimes were run. If you didn't go along with the party line, if you didn't toe what your elitist faction masters wanted, calling themselves the Communist Party or whatever they wanted to call themselves, then you didn't work. You didn't get health care. Or at least the only care you were likely to get was the kind they gave to Solzhenitsyn, sending people off to psych wards and pretended they had gone crazy because they wouldn't bite the bullet and follow the insanity of a communist regime. And this is all developing here right before our eyes. You could see it coming a long time ago. And now that it is upon us more clearly, but still not consolidated in its power, I think the American people need to wake up, get rid of every other difference we may have, and decide that no, we can get back to all of that, but right now we want to make sure that whatever differences we have, we deal with those differences as a free people, not as the slaves of some tyrannical little despot.
Well said. Let me get Jessica to jump in on this conversation.
You know, I love listening to your comments, Dr. Keys, because you're so right on. And, you know, you have a way of saying the things that most of us would like to say without sounding like, you know, you're just crazy, like you mentioned. But that's exactly right. You know, you made the mention of about control, healthcare. It's not about healthcare, it's about control. But I hadn't thought about it from that angle in regards to the NSA. However, that's a very good point. Why are they letting us know? Why is this all out? Perhaps it is to scare people. Absolutely. To think, well, now I can't say the things I'd want to say on my blog, on my text messages, on my phone. Basically 1984. And right now we are in a moment in this country where more and more people are maybe deciding to come forth and be valiant and be traitors. You know, as John Boehner mentioned, it's their way of scaring us into submission, into the corner, under the bed. Don't come out and do that because we will get you. And I'd like to bring Boehner up a little bit. You know, he mentioned and said that Ed Snowden was a traitor. And I think the traitors are sitting up there on Capitol Hill and remaining quiet when they know, they might know, I'll give them the benefit that they do know, that we have a government that is spying on us. And they are using that NSA as the excuse to keeping us safe. But as you mentioned, Stan, you know, if they were keeping us safe, we wouldn't have had a Boston bombing. But in fact, it has nothing to do with safety and security. It has everything to do with control. And I was thinking when Dr. Keats was speaking, you know, how are we going to change this? What can we do? And it all comes down, I think, to two things. One is we get those people in Congress out of there who are not willing to stand up with the American public. And two, or we could also question, why are they not standing up? Is because I don't think that they want to give up the power. They don't want to give the power to the states and have the states say, you know, we have our sovereignty. We don't have to agree with the federal government's Obamacare or their NSA spying or their drone program or their TSA. we can put a stop to it. And I think that it's getting down to the line where the states are going to have to basically use their Second Amendment right and say we're not going to comply with this big brother government, and we're not going to help fund it, and we're not going to allow your agencies to come in and bully us into this submission.
That's a good point, Jessica. Dr. Keys, your response.
Well, I think that Jessica's right. One of the things I've said for a long time is that one of the first things you have to do when folks are trying to destroy your rights is you have to just say no. You have to take a stand. You have to remember what those rights are and stand upon them. And that is what was so well done by our founders. I was recently watching again here at home. We were watching a movie called April Morning that was made back in the 1980s about the stand of people at Lexington and Concord. And one of the moving things about it, because it was a reasonably accurate depiction of the situation they were in, is that the first people who had to stand up to the British force that was going to try to confiscate the arms and ammunition of the Patriots who were in the Lexington Concord area. One of the first groups was a little group of about 80 people, less than 80 people. They were most just ordinary folks. They weren't soldiers. Some of them had a little experience in the French and Indian War, but most of them were just folks. They included people of a range of ages and so forth. They didn't have the military training, but deeply convinced that the British forces intended to overthrow their self-government and their rights as a free people. They simply took a stand. And they didn't go to that green that day thinking, we're going to kill the British and all of this. No, they didn't want to fight. There were people who didn't believe in killing and so forth. But they said, we'll try to talk to these people, but in the end, if they won't talk, we have been working together for months to prepare ourselves to resist their tyranny, and we will take a stand here while people gather all round to make the stand with us in the course of the next day or two. And that's what happened. And it started out with 80 folks, and it ended up with nearly, I think it was 4,000 people or more, who then spent the day harassing the British column and so forth and so on until they turned tail and went back into Boston. And that was the first battle, a Pyrrhic victory for the British, as they call it, because the Americans had made the point. And that point was then vindicated in the course of the years ahead. I think we've reached that point in America now. And I don't mean by that the point where we got to stand and start. No, that is perhaps round the corner. But what is upon us is the need to take a clear stand that says, no, we will not accept these abuses as business as usual. No, we will not accept leaders and let them claim they speak for us, like John Boehner, who want us to stomach this destruction of our Constitution and of our rights. And if they refuse to take action, then we will organize amongst ourselves as those patriots did. They were going up against the best army in the world. They were going up against a rich power. They were not themselves well-heeled or anything. But they used the available tools, including their own bodies and the pulpits and other things, to communicate and to organize so that they could stand in defense of their liberty. And we need to do that at two levels. We need to fight the battle that we can still fight as citizens. But I don't think we've been fighting that battle effectively over the last few years because too many people have let themselves be gulled by the lying, deceitful leaders of the Republican Party. I point the finger at them because these years are the years the locust has eaten for American patriots. Years when they wasted their time and wasted their money and wasted their efforts backing people who had no commitment whatsoever to our Declaration principle, to our constitutional rights, and to our status, God-given, as the sovereign people of the United States. And it's time that we put them on notice. You will impeach these people. You will call them to account as the Constitution makes it your duty to do. Or we will do what Americans have always done. And we will represent ourselves if you won't represent us. And lift up the leaders who can speak for us and act for us and help us to coordinate our aspirations for the future of our country and freedom. The Republicans are refusing to do this. And on every front, in fact, they are colluding with the enemy to destroy our economy. They are colluding with the enemy to destroy our borders. They hold up people as hopes. Everybody saying, Marco Rubio, he's the great hope. Selling out this country at the border. And daring to suggest that before we are safe, we should allow ourselves to be overrun by folks who are coming here, they admit, not to be Americans and to exercise liberty in a responsible way, but for jobs and for money and for benefits. That's not the immigration that built this country. And for them to lie and say that it is a sign of their betrayals. And I think it's time we woke up to this. I just pray. I am praying every day. I have prayed for weeks and months and years for people to wake up to these lies. Because what at the end of the day kills you is not just the enemy who is trying to poison you and do you to death. It's the false friend who leads you to drop your guard so that that enemy can destroy you. And we have for too long been living with a leadership of false friends in the Republican Party who are dropping our guard and letting this enemy of freedom destroy our country.
I think we have to also understand where the Republicans have been malfeasant, the Democrats have been deviant and destructive. And where I will slap the crap out of a mealy-mouthed Republican, I will slit the throat out of a Democrat, what is the word? Traitor. Thank you. That would destroy our way of life and destroy our children and destroy our faith in God, because that's what they want. Alan is eloquent, and I am in awe. I, on the other hand, feel that there's an old Jewish saying that works here. It's schmeiß the schmooze and chap the mazola, which basically means cut the crap and go for the point, the gut, the reward, the whatever you want to call it. The next time you see a liberal that is promoting these deviant things, or if Obama crosses the street in front of you, well, what can I say?
Well, Stan, can I have a point here? Because
Sure.
one of the things, though, that has struck me, I was just revisiting this the other day for various reasons, and spent some time pondering it fairly deeply last year when I was preparing for a lecture at the conference in Princeton. The interesting thing about the Americans who eventually stood and fought in the Revolution was that they understood two things about the nature of justice. First, Stan, the people who are standing on their rights and fighting for justice should not strike the first blow. And anything that suggests that we should is deeply wrong. And I'll say that bluntly. Okay? We take a stand upon our rights. I am not a rebel. I am not a traitor. I am not some lawless individual. And Americans never have been. I fight for right. I fight for law. I fight for the supreme law of this land, to stand upon it responsibly in the way that God requires of me. And one of the things God requires of me, Stan, is that I don't love violence. I abhor it. I hate war. I hate violence. I hate mayhem. I hate everything that raises the stench of destruction of innocence in the nostrils of God. But I will say this. Because I love God and right and liberty, I will stand the stench of war before I will live in the stink of tyranny. And that's the stand we need to be taking here. We need to know what we're for, Stan, not just what we're against. And what has sickened me, I'll put it bluntly, about the Republican leadership is that they are all ready to exploit resentment, hatred, anger against this one and against that one. But they have no longer any sense of how to make our hearts leap with pride and with joy and with the resonance of God's will when we think of our liberty, which we defend, and our rights, which we have known how to exercise to build the greatest country the world has yet seen. I think we need to remember that. Because I'm not about fighting for something and slitting people's throats and all this. If I can win this victory without killing a single person, firing a single shot, it is better than to do it in any other way. And I believe, Stan, that if we stop talking as if we are already enslaved, and remember that we are not, we still have before us opportunities of freedom, and we need to take them. But we're not going to take them if we continue to follow leaders who will not challenge us to do so. And that's what the Republicans have been. So I make no excuses for them anymore. I can't stand the thought of what they have done, wasting these years, when they should have been helping the people of this country to rediscover their principles and stand their ground for their Constitution and their liberty. And I think it's time we stopped wasting time on them and started to look to the real task before us. Whether we have to do it and can do it by the peaceful constitutional means our founders intended, or whether we end up having to do it by other means, the key now is to organize, organize, organize at the grassroots for ourselves out from under the shadow of the fellow travelers who have betrayed us.
All right. Jessica, I'll give you a final thought, and Chief.
I couldn't agree any more with Dr. Keyes, and as he was speaking, I got chills on my body, and it's burning hot in this room, I'll tell you. Lord Jesus, I hope we will pray also and do our best to get that message out. I know that for me, it was, after the campaign and campaigning for a whole year and then losing, it was very disheartening, and you just think everything is gone to waste. But, listening to those words and those comments, it brings the strength back, and we have to. And I will continue to think and ponder, what it is that I can say, that I can do to wake people up, to want to understand what this country really represents and what our freedoms and liberty mean to all of us. Because we are losing it, but as Dr. Key said, fighting and picking up a gun is the last resort. But if we must, at some point, we shall. But we have to continue to fight and hold these individuals, as he said, these Republicans accountable for the fact that they are leaving us out to dry, and who knows for what reason. John Boehner leading that pack. I'm tired of it also. And I'll do my best, and hopefully others will do, I'll try to find others to do their part as well.
Thanks, Jessica. Chief?
I'm honored to be a part of this show that I really believe is dedicated to helping preserve liberty in America. And Dr. Keyes is very eloquent, even when he's on fire. It's just awesome. But something he said really struck home with me, and I want to quote something from a movie. I'm a movie buff, and in the movie Stripes, Bill Murray, as John Winger, made this statement. He said, "We are not Spartans, we are not Watusi, we're Americans with a capital A." The first American killed in the Revolutionary War was a black American named Crispus Attucks. We must stay above the muck. We must stay above all of that. Remember that we're Americans. Americans come first. We were created in God's image. Our Constitution was worth defending 200 and some years ago. It's worth defending today.
And on that note, we thank you so much for being a part of our show. We hope that you will go to loyaltoliberty.com and read Dr. Keyes' works, that you will follow what we do, and we are interested in your thoughts and your ideas, even your suggestions for guests. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.
If I wanted America to fail, to follow, not lead, to suffer, not prosper, to despair, not dream, I'd start with energy. I'd cut off America's supply of cheap, abundant energy. I couldn't take it by force. So I'd make Americans feel guilty about using the energy that heats their homes, fuels their cars, runs their businesses, and powers their economy. I'd make cheap energy expensive, so that expensive energy would seem cheap. I would empower unelected bureaucrats to all but outlaw America's most abundant sources of energy. After banning its use in America, I'd make it illegal for American companies to ship it overseas. If I wanted America to fail, I'd use their schools to teach one generation of Americans that their factories and their cars will cause a new ice age, and I'd muster a straight face so I could teach the next generation that they're causing global warming. When it's cold out, I'd call it climate change instead. I'd imply that America's cities and factories could run on wind power and wishes. I'd teach children how to ignore the hypocrisy of condemning logging, mining, and farming while having roofs over their heads, heat in their homes, and food on their tables. I would never teach children that the free market is the only force in human history to uplift the poor, establish the middle class, and create lasting prosperity. Instead, I demonize prosperity itself so that they will not miss what they will never have. If I wanted America to fail, I would create countless new regulations and seldom cancel old ones that would be so complicated that only bureaucrats, lawyers, and lobbyists could understand them. That way small businesses with big ideas wouldn't stand a chance. And I would never have to worry about another Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, or Steve Jobs. I would ridicule as flat earthers those who urge them to lower energy costs by increasing supply. And when the evangelists of common sense try to remind people about the laws of supply and demand, I'd enlist the sympathetic media to drown them out. If I wanted America to fail, I would empower unaccountable bureaucracy seated in a distant capital to bully Americans out of their dreams and their property rights. I'd send federal agents to raid guitar factories for using the wrong kind of wood. I'd force homeowners to tear down their own homes built on their own land. I'd make it almost impossible for farmers to farm, miners to mine, loggers to log, and builders to build. Because I don't believe in free markets, I'd invent false ones. I'd devise fictitious products like carbon credits and trade them in imaginary markets. I convince people that this would create jobs and be good for the economy. If I wanted America to fail, for every concern I'd invent a crisis, and for every crisis I'd invent a cause, like shutting down entire industries and killing tens of thousands of jobs in the name of saving spotted owls. And when everyone learned the stunning irony that the owls were victims of their larger cousins and not people, it would already be decades too late. If I wanted America to fail, I'd make it easier to stop commerce than to start it, easier to kill jobs than create them, more fashionable to resent success than to seek it. When industries seek to create jobs, I'd file lawsuits to stop them, and then I'd make taxpayers pay for my lawyers. If I wanted America to fail, I would transform the environmental agenda from a document of conservation to an economic suicide pact. I would concede entire industries to our economic rivals by imposing regulations that cost trillions. I would celebrate those who preach environmental austerity in public while indulging a lavish lifestyle in private. I convince Americans that Europe has it right and that America has it wrong. If I wanted America to fail, I would prey on the goodness and the decency of ordinary Americans. I would only need to convince them that all of this is for the greater good. If I wanted America to fail, I suppose I wouldn't change a thing.